The Australian share market hits a 5-month high with the iron ore miners, energy companies and healthcare stocks showing the way. The government's industrial relations bill comes under fire from both big and small businesses, and Black Friday sales start early with more than $6 billion in turnover expected over just 4 days. It's Wednesday, the 23rd of November, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, Sean, I need to share a little story. I spoke to you late yesterday. I was very excited because I'm a big fan of Bluey.
You are.
Our entire household is a big fan of Bluey. And the reason why I'm excited at the moment is because Bluey's just taken off lately. And Bluey is, of course, the TV show. It started out as just this little show on ABC. It's an animated show about a family of dogs, blue heelers, and they live in Brisbane, and it is great. And it has gone from being on the ABC here to just exploding kind of worldwide, and it is because it's been picked up by Disney, and so it's just taking over the US at the moment. There's a live show going around over there. There's a Bluey balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. The two adult stars are over there at the moment in New York, and I was excited yesterday telling you about how they were going to be on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. And you were not excited. In fact,
No.
I got the complete opposite reaction. It was almost an audible kind of shudder come from you.
Yes. Well, I had this unfortunate incident with a blue cattle dog in Central Park in New York. The little bugger bit me. So we were about to get on the plane. We were wasting a couple of hours before we went out to JFK. And there was a dog in Central Park off its lead, or it had a lead on, but no one was holding the lead. And it came up and I patted it. It was very friendly. And then it started snarling at me. And it was sort of ironic, an Australian dog in Central Park. The next thing I knew, it bit me.
So while we have Bluey taking over the States, and in particular taking over New York, you were in New York getting bitten by a blue heeler in Central Park.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And I was screaming at the owners to come and grab the lead because it was snarling. It wanted to go me again. It was not. I have no idea why. I'm a nice bloke. No idea why the dog would want to bite me.
Dogs can sense things, Sean.
Within 24 hours, I was off last night to get a tetanus shot. There you go.
Tetanus shot. I just have this image of it in the backside.
Moving on.
Moving on. There's a new episode out of How Do They Afford That today, Sean. This is our other podcast, obviously, with me and Canna Campbell, the founder of Sugar Mama TV. How Do They Afford That is the name of the show. This one, I suspect, could be our most popular one yet because this is all about side hustles and a whole stack of ideas on how to make a bit of extra cash on the side. And Canna has a stack of really good ideas on just how to generate a little bit of extra money. So you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. How Do They Afford That? And we'll also put a link in today's show notes. But, Sean, we have heaps to talk about. You've got an interview coming up afterwards with Brian Han from Morningstar as well.
Yeah, that's all about what he likes in the market at the moment, where the opportunities are. What's really interesting in the conversation, Brian goes into, there's a bunch of sectors, which we'll talk about in a moment, in fact, in the main story, like energy, where companies have really run hard, but Brian still thinks there are opportunities in some of those sectors. And then we talk about those that have sold off, consumer discretionary stocks, for example, and he talks about where he thinks there are some opportunities there as well. So if you're an investor, definitely have a listen.
Yeah, it's a really good one. It's coming up a little bit later on. But the main story this morning, Sean, as you say, is linked to that because the local share market hit a 5-month high yesterday with investors seemingly unconcerned about potential shutdowns in China and fears that higher fuel and home borrowing costs will slow consumers.
That's right. The market is showing its strength at the moment, led by the big iron ore companies, energy stocks and healthcare companies. Now, over the past month, the S&P ASX 200 is up about 6%. I mentioned this yesterday. I went away for a couple of weeks and I came back and I just couldn't believe how high the ASX was. This is despite rates continuing to rise, petrol prices remaining high, the war in Ukraine going on, and a real likelihood of recession in Europe and the US. So, what's the reason for the more positive sentiment? Growing confidence that the worst of the inflation crisis might be over, even if interest rates need to rise further. It certainly takes pressure off earnings if the worst of inflation is over. Now, in late afternoon trading yesterday, the S&P ASX 200 hit 7,194 points. That's its highest level since June 5. By the end of the day, it was up about 0.6% at 7,181 points. I'm sounding a bit like a broken record here, Michael, but the energy companies again led the way. Whitehaven was up 8% yesterday. It's up 280% over the past 12 months, easily the best of the top 200. The second best of the top 200 is another coal company, New Hope. It jumped 7.6% yesterday and is up 192% over the past year. Pretty amazing. But over the past month, it's been more widespread than just those coal and energy companies. Financials make up 29% of the top 200. Materials, which include the big iron ore miners, are about 23%. And healthcare is about 10%. If those sectors do okay, then the bourse follows.
And they have been doing okay?
Well, yes, over the past month, BHP's up 11%, Rio Tinto has jumped 13%, Fortescue's up 15%. Woodside Energy, quite an incredible story. It's been a real powerhouse ever since Woodside combined with BHP's oil assets. Over the past month, that stock has continued to rise, up another 8%. The leading healthcare stock, CSL, it's up 9%. Ramsay Healthcare's jumped 11%. Now, the laggards are actually the banks, with the notable exception of Commonwealth Bank. It's up 7% over the past month, while the other three, National Australia Bank, Westpac and ANZ, are flat or a bit lower. Then there's the occasional standout. Wesfarmers is an example, up 9% over the past month. That's why the market has done so well, and that's why it's at a 5-month high.
All right. Is it going to keep going? Will the market keep rising?
Well, who knows? I mean, we do have that great interview straight after the show with Morningstar's Brian Hand. I'd listen to that. But really, if you think about it, the big risk to the market is earnings not coming in as forecast. Now, that's an overseas phenomenon as much as it is here in Australia. But clearly at the moment, there's a fair bit of confidence among investors.
Yeah, seems that way. And of course, we're not an investment podcast. Always a good idea to get professional advice before making investment decisions. What's happening in international markets, Sean?
Just quickly, Michael, oil prices are pretty flat. Gold's a touch higher. The Aussie dollar is buying around 66 US cents. And Bitcoin has come off even further. It's trading kind of around 15,500 US dollars a unit.
All right, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the federal government's industrial relations bill is centre stage in Canberra at the moment, with Labor saying it will extend sitting days to pass the legislation while businesses are fighting against it.
Where to begin on this one, Michael? First, let's start with the government yesterday saying it wants to pass the legislation by Christmas and it's likely to extend sitting days to do so. The particularly sticky point in this bill is multi-employer bargaining and what that means for businesses. For example, small businesses will face bargaining costs of about $14,600 according to the department's regulatory impact statement into the bill. Now, Goldstein independent Zoe Daniel wants to raise the threshold of small business under the bill. At the moment, a small business would be exempt from multi-employer bargaining if it's got 15 or fewer workers. But Ms. Daniel says her electorate has about 17,000 small businesses with a headcount of 15 plus. She wants that 15 or fewer workers to rise so that small businesses wouldn't be caught up in it. And there's a lot of support for that.
Yeah, well, that's small business. Big business isn't happy either.
No, they're very vocal at the moment. National Australia Bank Chief Executive Ross McEwen yesterday warned that multi-employer bargaining could risk undermining competition and says the enterprise system needs simplification, not more layers. Gina Reithart's company, Hancock Prospecting, was also on the hustings yesterday. It attacked the government's new laws, warning they'll threaten thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in mining royalty revenue. Michael, we're going to hear plenty about industrial relations over the next few weeks.
We sure are. Now, this is an interesting one, Sean. Vicinity Centre's former chief executive, Grant Kelly, quit only days after receiving a first and final warning after a sexual harassment complaint against him was investigated.
That's right. Mr. Kelly stepped down last week earlier than expected. According to the Financial Review, there was an investigation into the sexual harassment complaint and also a second investigation which found a high degree of workplace dysfunction in senior executive ranks stemming from Mr. Kelly's behaviour. The initial report, concluded earlier this month by an independent investigator appointed by the board, upheld multiple allegations against Mr. Kelly, including that he made intrusive comments about a senior female executive's attractiveness and boasted to her about his sexual conquests. The board received legal advice that Mr. Kelly's statements constituted sexual harassment. He quit just a few days later.
Sean, Black Friday sales have already commenced ahead of the official Black Friday kickoff in 2 days' time. There's some seriously good deals around. I have been doing a little bit of Christmas shopping, which will probably not surprise you.
No surprises, yep.
No. And retailers are forecasting about $6.2 billion in sales over the 4-day period.
Yeah, so Black Friday is the start of the Christmas selling season. It actually comes from the United States, and Black Friday is the Friday after Thanksgiving in North America. Locally, it runs from Friday through to what we call Cyber Monday. Now, last year in Australia, Black Friday sales were actually bigger than Boxing Day, which traditionally has been the biggest day of the year. The Australian Retailers Association, in conjunction with Roy Morgan, expect turnover to be about the same as last year, around that $6.2 billion mark, and that's despite all the cost of living pressures going on at the moment. Like last year, pet products, sport and outdoor activities and electronic products are expected to be the big sellers. It's kind of self-evident, but this period from now until just after Christmas is make or break for retailers. And in some categories, such as recreation, it's almost 50% of annual sales. Other sectors, it's about a third: fashion, liquor, electronic sales. So this next 6 weeks really is vital for retailers.
Now, Sean, you mentioned earlier the price of Bitcoin at the moment. An Australian Bitcoin miner, Iris Energy, which is listed on the NASDAQ on Wall Street, is close to collapse after creditors demanded the group repay its debts.
That's right. Iris Energy listed 12 months ago. People were buying shares at about $28. It's now trading around $1.50 US, meaning plenty of local investors have done their money. Iris said US creditors want the immediate repayment of $108 million in loans that it took out to buy Bitcoin mining equipment. Now, stay with me here, Michael. Bitcoin runs on a decentralized computer network that tracks transactions in the cryptocurrency. When computers on the network verify and process transactions, new Bitcoins are created or mined. Now, these networked computers or miners process the transaction in exchange for a payment in Bitcoin. So basically, they're the infrastructure. The miners, the infrastructure of the Bitcoin system. Problem is, the value of Bitcoin has tumbled. So the value of the Bitcoin mining machines, and in this case, Iris Energy, has also tumbled. And of course, the lenders want their money back. So bad news.
Yeah, sure is. Now, Origin Energy's boss, Frank Calabria, has made his first comments on Canadian investment giant Brookfield Asset Management's $18.4 billion bid for his group 2 weeks ago.
And that's pretty unusual because Mr. Calabria is regularly out there promoting Origin. Yesterday, he said there's no shortage of global capital keen to invest in Australia's transition to low-carbon energy, and the takeover bid was evidence of that. Now, Brookfield has said it wants to invest a further $20 billion to help in the transition. It's currently in an 8-week due diligence period to firm up the offer. Mr. Calabria didn't endorse the bid, nor did he speak against it, but he said honesty is needed about the likely impact on customers' bills from the huge investment required to transform the energy supply system to low emissions in Australia.
Sean, revenue at the Stars flagship casino in Sydney has fallen 11% over the past 4 months, coinciding with the opening of Crown Resorts in the Harbour City.
And that drop in revenue occurred just as its licence was suspended, forcing the group to hire new staff to ensure better compliance following the state's bill review of the casino operations. While the Star in Sydney is still operating, revenue is lower and costs are rising. At its annual general meeting yesterday, the Star said remediation costs for the New South Wales inquiry would be around $40 million this financial year. That's a lot of money. The good news for the Star is that its Gold Coast casino revenue is up 32%. Revenue from its Brisbane operation has risen 9%. Overall, its share price fell more than 1% yesterday. It's down nearly 25% this year.
Now, Sean, I don't really know what to make of this next one. It's just really disappointing, this story. The Smith family said that the names and details of some of its donors were exposed to hackers during an unsuccessful attempt to steal funds from the charity.
Yeah, I agree. What do you say about it? I mean, the personal information of supporters that may have been accessed includes a mixture of names, phone numbers, addresses and emails, and in some instances, the first and last 4 digits of the credit or debit card used to donate. Now, no middle digits, expiry date, or CVV numbers were accessed, and the charity does not collect or hold personal identity documents such as passports or driver's license. It's just the latest in a string of high-profile hacks hitting corporate Australia. Clearly, these criminals know no boundaries.
Yeah, seems that way. Moving on to overseas news now, and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said he has conveyed Australia's condolences to Indonesian President Joko Widodo and offered support after an earthquake struck West Java on Monday evening.
The 5.6 magnitude quake killed at least 162 people, injured 700 and displaced around 13,000 people, but the casualty numbers could climb as rescuers struggle to reach the mountainous region. There was also a 7.3 magnitude earthquake in the Solomon Islands yesterday morning, triggering a tsunami warning. No Australians are believed to have been injured by either earthquake.
Sean, lockdowns in China are growing, with COVID restrictions now hitting 1/5 of the economy.
Infections are rising fast, with 27,000 new cases on Monday. The manufacturing hub of Guangzhou remains the epicenter of the current wave. Of course, it comes a week after there were signs from Beijing that it would ease its zero-tolerance policy that has hit the world's second-largest economy pretty hard. While citywide lockdowns, like in Shanghai earlier this year, have not been ordered this time, there are a growing number of restrictions in about 48 Chinese cities.
And finally, Sean, the Football World Cup is becoming a political focal point as much as it is a sporting event after teams representing 7 European nations at the World Cup said their captains won't wear LGBTQI armbands in Qatar after FIFA said players sporting the bands would be penalised.
Yes, the national federations expressed frustration at FIFA's decision, but said they couldn't put their captains at risk. That's fair enough. Michael, 3 days in, there's been this latest furor over human rights and the treatment of the LGBTQI community in Qatar, where homosexuality is a crime. There's been the decision that beer won't be available in stadiums in the conservative Muslim emirate, infuriating one of FIFA's long-term partners. And the Iranian team stood silently during its national anthem in support of protests across that country during the past 2 months. So the Football World Cup is certainly very political.
Yeah, sure is. Okay, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You mentioned it before, Sean. You were speaking today to Brian Hand from Morningstar.
Yeah, anyone who is an investor looking for opportunities should tune into this one.
Yeah, it's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, where you can also find the new episode of How Do They Afford That? Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 23rd of November, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.